Hi, I'm Emily Bergman, and I am the AJL liaison to ALA. Thank you for joining us today. Before we introduce our guest, Andrea Jamison, let me tell you a bit about AJL. In 1946, the Jewish Librarians Association was founded and composed of academic, archival, and research institutions. The Jewish Library Association, founded in 1962, emphasized work in synagogue, school, and community center libraries. These two associations merged in 1966 as the Association of Jewish Libraries. In 2010, AJL became an affiliate of the American Library Association and is currently one of its 7 ethnic affiliates. Today, AJL is the leading authority on Judaic librarianship and a vibrant, volunteer-run nonprofit professional organization that fosters access to information and research in all forms of media relating to all things Jewish. The association promotes Jewish literacy and scholarship and provides a community for peer support and for professional development. For more information on becoming a member, please visit our website at jewishlibraries.org. I'm also involved in the Jewish Information Committee of the Ethnic and Multicultural Information Exchange Roundtable. If you are a member of ALA, I hope you'll join EMIRT and work with me to provide more connections between AJL and ALA. I've worked with Andrea for over 5 years through our mutual involvement on the EMIRT Executive Board, and I've seen her work hard and step up whenever needed. She joined us at our schmooze and nosh last weekend at Libler Next in Phoenix. So now I'm pleased to introduce you to Andrea Jamison. Andrea's career spans school, public, and academic libraries. She's a current member of the Association of Library Service to Children, the Black Caucus of ALA, and the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable. She's also a juror for the Coretta Scott King Book Award Roundtable. We were together at the YMAs cheering on our groups. Former CSK breakfast chair and immediate past chair of the Ethnic and Multicultural Information Exchange Roundtable, EMIR. She served as ALA Counselor at Large from 2021 to 2019, and she was chair of the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom Working Group for Diversity in Collection Development in 2017. She is the Social Justice Chair for the Institute of Humane Education, a Community of Practice Group Leader for Diverse Bookfinder, and Library Ambassador for Lee and Low Books. She authored Decentering Whiteness in Libraries, a framework for inclusive collection management practices, which is part of the Beta Phi Mu Scholars series. She was also the 2022-2023 Teaching Scholar in Residence in the area of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for Illinois State University. Andrea has a PhD in Information Studies from Dominican University, an MLIS from Dominican, a Master's of Teaching from Concordia University, and a BBA from Robert Morris College. Andrea, how did you decide to become a librarian?
Wow, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak with you all about my vision for ALA president. And thank you so much, Emily, for that introduction. So I became a librarian. I started off as a self-contained classroom teacher in the early 90s, and I worked in a community that was economically depressed. And we had a library, but we didn't have a librarian. And so one day I took my students on a field trip in Chicago, and we were on the expressway and we passed a stop, and the name of the stop was California. And one of my students said to me, "Are we in California?" And that was eye-opening for me. I recognized that my students had a really small worldview, and I wanted to change that. And so from that moment, I started taking my students to the library, even though we didn't have a librarian. And I started doing library projects with them. And one day, we would do projects where I would introduce them to the rainforest. I would introduce them to various countries. And we would do these very comprehensive projects, and we would do celebrations for them as well. And one day the principal said to me, pulled me into the office. I thought I was in trouble. And he said to me, "I really enjoy what you're doing with the students. And I think that all of the students in the building can benefit." And so he said, "Next year, I'm putting you in the library." And so That's how I became the librarian. And at the time I did it on a waiver. So I had 2 years to earn classes or earn my endorsement in the field. And I was just fortunate. And ever since I've loved it and I've been in it.
And now you teach it.
Yes. So for those of you that may know me, I started off as a classroom teacher and then I became a school librarian. From school libraries, um, I went into public libraries. I'm trying to get the order correct. I went into public libraries and I was still working with young adults, youth literature in the public libraries. And then I became an academic librarian and now I teach. I work with pre-service librarians and teachers. Yeah.
Why are you running for ALA president?
Oh. So I am running for president
Asked you this
because,
before.
okay, so I'm running for president because I strongly believe that the American Library Association needs a leader, a chief spokesperson who is going to address the current social and political climate that we're experiencing right now, particularly as it relates to libraries and our services to our communities. So that's the real reason, or the overarching reason. I'm also running because I think that the climate that we're living in, the anti-DEI climate, the climate that um, censorship is constantly changing right now. I think that we need someone that's going to be proactive and who's going to get in front of these issues and address these issues strategically. I think that the American Library Association historically has taken a position where we've tried to be neutral on issues. And when we try to be neutral, communities are negatively impacted. I also think that it's important for us to really build collaborations and partnerships so that we can address this issue multiple different ways, as opposed to us being in our own individual spaces trying to deal with censorship and the misinformation that's being perpetuated about librarians. Because of my work, I feel as if I am in a position, because as being an educator of teachers as well as pre-service librarians, I'm in school districts, so I also have the opportunity to work with administrators. So I feel like I'm skilled at building relationships. So we need someone who's going to build coalitions, who's going to bring communities together on this issue. I'm also an ALA trained racial healing practitioner. And as I'm thinking about these issues, I'm also thinking about my students, right? I feel a sense of obligation, a strong sense of obligation that I'm asking students as they're coming into this field, I'm asking them to be advocates, to advocate for all of their patrons. I'm asking them to advocate for intellectual freedom. I can't ask them to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. And I feel a strong sense of obligation that they may not have the language being new into the field to address some of these issues. And they may also be afraid because librarians have faced backlash. So I feel that I have an obligation to be a good steward of the field that I'm turning over to students. And I've been in this industry, I've been in libraries for over 20 plus years. I have the language, I have an understanding of the history of libraries. And I feel that I can use that knowledge to advocate not only for my peers, but for the librarians who are entering this field as well.
I don't know, others may be curious as I am. ALA trained healing practitioner. What is that?
So a few years ago, the American Library Association, and this was pre-Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of things that were happening in society where there was a lot of racial divisiveness. The Office of Intellectual Freedom held trainings with a group of librarians that were interested to come together to be able to facilitate sessions that help people across various cultures, communities, experiences come together and connect outside of various differences. So it was a training that is geared towards leading difficult conversations, which I do a lot, with the end goal of allowing people across various divides to connect in meaningful ways so that we can work together. I think sometimes what happens is that there's a lot going on in society right now, and we're expected to be in this space of it's just business as usual. But the reality of it is it's never business as usual because we bring our whole selves into these spaces. And so when you're bringing your whole self into these spaces, whatever is happening in society that's impacting you and your family, it is going to impact your work. And so this is a way that we can come together and address these issues and acknowledge that we all have vulnerabilities in our lives. We all have areas of oppression or trauma that cannot and should not be ignored in these spaces. And when we are attuned to each other, our own healing, when we're attuned to our own, when we're connected, we're able to work together more effectively on a common goal. And we cannot be connected and whole unless we address those issues that keep us apart. So that's a racial healing practitioner.
What is your vision for ALA?
Okay, so I'm going to start with this joke. And I don't know if it's I was shocked after I met with the nomination committee and I found out that they approved me to be on the ballot because I have been critical of the American Library Association. So I was really shocked. But my criticism, if anyone has read my work, articles that have been published in the Washington Post from the interviews, I've been very vocal about certain issues. One is the issue that historically, the American Library Association, we have not done a good job in being responsive to all communities when we are experiencing a very hostile political climate. And thinking back to the 1900s, especially during the time of the maltreatment of African Americans, the American Library Association, their silence on what was happening in Europe, the book burnings in Austria. And because of that, so many communities suffered. Dr. Martin Luther King said that when there's no justice, that there will be civil unrest. And so libraries were forced to attend to what was happening in society due to the civil unrest. And there's a lot of things that are happening right now socially and politically that I think could be that can really have a negative impact on not only librarians. On one hand, we're saying we need to make sure that we recruit more librarians of color into the organization, but when opportunities for us to speak up for communities of color happen, we don't do that. And so it's only logical or plausible that we would lose librarians of color and from various communities because we're not being responsive. And so because of that, my major priority issue is that there's so much misinformation being perpetuated about librarians in terms of disseminating obscene materials to youth, being people who indoctrinate, and we have not pushed back on this enough. Librarians have been doxxed, trolled, harassed. And so I feel that we need to do a better job of pro-library legislation and protections for librarians, specifically because we see the trend of states developing anti-library legislation. So I have been working with some publishers. I'm also a part of an advisory committee in the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois was one of the first states to pass House Bill 2789, which is an anti-censorship bill. And what I've learned from that, going to town hall meetings, speaking up when politicians have asked me to talk on the issue, is that we need to do more than just have toolkits that we put on a website and saying, this is what you need to do to advocate for pro-library legislation. And so I've been actively working with vested partners to try to push this. And the idea is that for many of you, this may resonate with you. In the city of Chicago, if you attack a person who is writing a parking ticket, you can be fined $1,000, or you can be you can receive jail time for up to 6 months because of the person is a protected class citizen because of their job. And I feel like librarians need that same type of protection because we work with the public. So because we work with the public and we work with many different types of constituents who have different opinions, we need to send a strong message that because we disagree, you do not have the right to attack a librarian. So that is my main platform. I'm also standing in solidarity with school librarians. School librarians have lost jobs. We do not do enough to support school librarians. They've lost jobs, and administrators don't get it. The students who, and I'm not going to say all administrators, but a lot of administrators, they don't understand what it is that we do and the value of having a school librarian in the building. And so my argument is, as ALA, we need to engage administrators. I'm working with school districts because I supervise pre-service teachers in their clinical settings. So we need to build relationships and we need to target administrators and invite them into the organization because we have a common interest of intellectual freedom, common interest of trying to navigate this sort of tricky terrain of censorship. And then there's the issue of financial transparency. And when I was on council, I love libraries. I love this field. And all of my criticism is an aim to say, we need to be better. We can be better. I was vocal against ALA selling the property that we owned. I live in Chicago. I knew that property was situated in the Gold Coast. We made $6 million off of the sale of that property. And we're in debt now and renting in the same area. We need more financial transparency. We need a board. It is the executive director that is responsible for managing the day-to-day operation of the organization. So we need protocols in place, someone who's going to be on the board that's going to ask hard questions and say no to business decisions that are fundamentally not going to be good for the long term, the longevity of this organization. I get it. I am part of an association. I own a condo. I understand what happens when you have a select few who are in power and who make decisions that impact people whose funds or whose membership dollars sustain the organization. Members need more input into these processes. And so we need to be more transparent. And so that is also one of my priority areas or vision for ALA.
Where do you see an association like AJL and its members within the broader landscape of ALA?
So because of a lot of the work that I do is vested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's not going to change. I recognize the importance of AJL and being able to contribute to the knowledge, the history, and the culture, the literacy, right, of Judaic librarianship. That's very important for setting the standards. One of the quotes that is in my email is a quote by Andrew Carnegie that says that there's no cradle of democracy as the free public library. The work that we do is vested on informing communities, making sure that they are information literate so that we don't have to deal with people listening to misinformation and thinking that it is accurate. So communities like AJL help in making sure that people outside of the Jewish community understand, can authenticate the history, that can authenticate the literacies, and can help people, can counter misinformation. As an educator, I'm having these conversations with my students often, and the biggest issue is this issue of building collections and what do they do with books that are anti-Semitic, right? And I'm always pointing them to, first and foremost, you have to go to the communities that set the standard and that are the authorities on this topic. And I view AJL as an authority. And secondly, and that's just not for selecting books and materials, but also how we classify those materials, right? Looking for that authenticity. And then you also have to look to the Library Bill of Rights in terms of what do we establish as being hate speech, right? And we don't know that unless we have community insiders that can set that tone. So I value AJL and being able to help educate the broader community of librarianship, which will in turn improve our collective practice, which will make us be better able to serve our respective communities. I would like to see, unfortunately, I think ALA is so divided. When I go to ALA, I feel like we're still sort of segregated, right? EMERT tries to rectify that, which being a multicultural kind of group. But if you have school librarians tend to hang with school librarians. If you have African-American librarians, we go to the African-American events. And I think we need to break down those barriers because the value of having expertise in our respective culture is so that we can build the knowledge capacity of each other. We talk about the value of diverse literature is so that it's not just for the communities that it represents, it's for the larger bodies because everybody benefits when they have knowledge about various cultures or dissimilar cultures and practices. And it builds this idea of cross-cultural competence and mutual respect. So we need everyone to have that seat, to set the guide and to set the standards so that we can look to each of these organizations as the authority.
What do you bring to ALA that is unique and will help move it forward?
So I purposely chose not to go into roles in my career that were administrative. When I worked at the public library, I was a branch supervisor in the absence. I was the acting supervisor in the absence of the branch manager or the supervisor. When I was in schools, I was in a principal program. I knew for me, I'm more of a people builder. I'm more of a person who works to build coalition, and I'm more of a visionary. And then because there's this, and I blame my parents because they were ministers and civil rights activists. There's a radical side of me who I have to think outside of the box. I can't conform. I say that because as a candidate, I'm approaching this position from a practitioner's base, right? So I have worked across all sections of, well, not all, because I haven't worked in special libraries, but I've worked in school, public, and academic libraries. And now I'm on the other side as an educator and as a researcher. And so I feel like I can advocate. And then I'm a woman of color, right? I'm part of a marginalized community. So I feel as if I already have a strong connection to most of the members. And I can advocate across various lines or barriers within the organization. And then my work is in team building. I could talk about, and honestly, the most difficult part of this campaign for me has been trying to tell people what I've done, right? Trying to read off my resume. I think it's important so people can have confidence that you know what you're doing. But fundamentally, I understand that it's people that bring change, not resumes. Um, I felt like I've accomplished a lot in my career. I have not accomplished it alone. I've accomplished it because I believe in this idea of people bringing their best assets to the table, and we all capitalize, or we benefit from each other's expertise. So to be more specific, I'm a visionary, I'm a coalition builder, and I can advocate for all librarians, and I'm willing to do that. I was asked by someone, what if ALA don't let you do all of the things that you are trying to do? And my response is that I'm more afraid that we stop asking. I'm more afraid that we stop these conversations. And I am for having these difficult conversations.
AGL wants to work more closely with the other ethnic affiliates, but there aren't any clear paths to doing that. Any suggestions?
Yes. um, so in the earlier question that you presented, I think I kind of hinted on this. I think we're very segregated within the profession. And I think we need to be, and the part of being segregated within the profession is that we don't benefit from each other's expertise. An example of that is, as a school librarian, I understand how school librarians, um, the work of school librarians impact the work of public and academic librarians, because oftentimes the school librarians is the first point of contact for some youth. So they're preparing them with those information literacy skills in hope that they can be transferable to other library settings. So we're getting students ready for public and academic library spaces. I also understand that academic librarians do research that inform the practices of public and school librarians. But when we're segregated, we don't capitalize off of that. We don't maximize off of the expertise that we all have within our respective fields. The same with, right, the Black Caucus of the American Library Association or the Rainbow Roundtable. So because of that, I feel like one of the things that we could do, and this is something that I've tried to do being chair of EMER, was to say, what are the opportunities that we can cross-collaborate in our training sessions when we talk to members? So in other words, when EMER is having a workshop or a training session, how do we step outside of the topics that we're used to and say, no, we want to bring in someone from AJL to talk about issues that we need to know about within our own respective libraries. And those are some of the issues that I talked about with the histories and also with respect to like collection development. What are some of the topics that are important to various cultures that we need to know about? Because what we don't talk about in these conversations of diversity is that whenever you have a space that just attends or predominantly attends to one community, it still lacks diversity. We make diversity black and white. It's not black and white. It's so much bigger, right? So we need spaces that we can have those opportunities for cross collaboration. And so with that, right, how can we start these conversations where we can increase AJL speaking to ALSC, right? Speaking to members of ALSC or speaking to the Black Caucus or having training sessions. Sometimes we think we don't need it. I'm an educator. I absolutely know that is incorrect. We need it because that's what's going to impact our service. I'm a better librarian because I approach librarianship outside of I do not say, Andrea, you are an African-American female, so you know everything there needs to know about the marginalized experience. That is absolutely wrong. I tell my students, I have to learn every day because there's so much more that I don't know culturally. There's so much more that I don't know outside of my own experience. And then no community is a monolith, right? People have intersectional identities. So we need to approach training and professional development from, I would love to see panels, more panels at ALA that has members from AJL, from various communities, leading not workshops, but I'm talking about main stage presentations. Because, and this is me as a researcher, everything we do is about messaging. So if we limit or marginalize various roundtables and divisions, topics to diversity to small workshops, that has a message. That signifies our commitment and our importance to it. These are topics that need to be keynote presentations where everyone in ALA has access to it. Because once we put the stamp of approval that it's this important, then librarians they'll feel that and they'll understand it. So.
All right, a little lighter. What are you reading?
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so that's an easy question. I have Justice, can you bring me my books? So my son and I, we read together. I have a 12-year-old son. And at Live Learn X, I just I moderated a session for author Nick Brooks. It was a wonderful session. Nick is the author of Promise Boys. I don't know if you could see that. And he is the author of, oh, this is Promise Boys, Up in Smoke. So I read Promise Boys when I was on the plane, and I told my son, I love this book so much that we are going to have to read it together. So I had just, before this session, put the books like right by him to say, these are the next two books that we're going to read. But yeah, these are the two books that I'm reading, but I try to be widely read across various communities so that I can be informed. But as of right now, it's these two books.
All right, we are open for questions from the audience. You can put your question in the chat. I don't see any at the moment, but you could also just raise your hand. Okay, so here's a question. I am a Jewish librarian and active member of ALA. When I see anti-Semitic posts on ALA Connect, oh yes, I sometimes go through the process of reporting. I prefer not to engage directly, but it's never found through the process to violate the code of conduct. It seems that the opinions of the majority of Jews on what anti-Semitism is are not often believed despite our lived experiences.
Right. And that is, so
I would actually pair that with the next question, which it looks like is on the same. I think the ALA Connect has struck a chord among a lot of our members. You see the next one as well also addresses ALA Connect. That's something to that, and I know I've heard from a lot of people.
If you are aware of the debates or arguments that occur sometimes on ALA Connect between Jewish librarians and those who post anti-Israel propaganda, there seems to be a strong anti-Israel bias insert that makes many Jewish librarians feel attacked and unwelcome. I think that they're different, but I think this is, and I have my own experience that happened at LibLearnX that I'll share.
I can address both of them. So because, right, as being African American, when I've led racial healing workshops, I've had people say, well, how do you feel as a minority, right? Not understanding that the term minority is offensive. It's both connotatively and denotatively offensive. And most African Americans don't view themselves as minorities. And so one of the things I do with my students all the time is before I start every class, we have to agree on language, appropriate language and what's not appropriate. And I think that needs to happen at the American Library Association. We need to have a conversation about and agree on language that is, and this is the problem. We don't want to have these conversations, and I've been in council, because they get heated. And so the way ALA leadership has dealt with it is to shut down the conversations, as opposed to, why don't we do a better job at tone policing, right? Setting the tone for these conversations to say, because as librarians, again, we bring our whole selves to this. A lot of times we don't have the language to interact with other communities or dissimilar communities because, we have not been taught. And so because of that, I think it's very problematic. And part of being, and the funny thing about it is, this is what I learned in being a racial healer practitioner, is that you interrupt language that is inappropriate and you deal with the language, right? We're dealing with the language and not making it personal about the people. And I don't see that happening in these discussions. And I think we need to have someone to say, okay, let's go back to our policies to make sure that everyone, I work in a school where there are very few professors of color. And so I'm in a space where conversations get heated all the time because of various political views and beliefs. And one of the things I have learned to do, that we have to do, is that you have to redirect conversations back to, wait a minute, are we upholding our commitments to language? One. Two, and are we staying on topic? Because when it comes to politics, especially as it relates to the American Library Association, the American Library Association is supposed to be nonpartisan. But when we don't address issues of oppression, we're actually making a statement for the side of the oppressor. We're actually speaking to those, we're giving power to those that are oppressing various groups. So I think that is an issue. And if I were president of the American Library Association, those types of things would not go on unaddressed. It would have to be addressed. And I feel that we can have those conversations. And I think that we need to agree. We need to agree on what is appropriate language. And we need to, that's why I say the panel discussions that we need to have, they need to be main stage panel discussions so that they can reach more librarians, so that more librarians can understand. It is offensive that someone is, that we use homophobic or that we use xenophobic language. And you have librarians that are saying we represent all communities, but they're using language that is inappropriate. And so, and one of the things I think the American Library Association can do, this is an easy fix, is to ask all of the communities, tell us language that is inappropriate that we should not be using, right? Have workshops and seminars on it so that we can understand. When people talk about tone police, we can understand what is meant by that, so that we can direct people back to, how can we represent communities and we're offending them? How can we talk to communities and at the same time offend them? Say that we're helping them, but at the same time disparage them. So yeah, so that would be.
So if you remember the membership meeting, the online membership meeting before annual, there was a resolution. It ostensibly was about Gaza, but what it said was that this resolution was not anti-Semitic. And my response was, you don't get to tell me, who feels it, experiences it, what is and is not, just like I would not tell you what is racism, because you know what it is. So I think that's part of what is in this question. And now I've not said this to anybody on this. This is going to be shocking to all my colleagues. So as you know, the Sidney Taylor Awards are presented at the YMAs. And one of our supporters, I'll just call her a supporter, brought headbands with these little things with Jewish stars on them. And we wore those. And then if you don't know, we then go on after and that was all, and we had pom-poms and we all cheered, just like I'm sure Andrea and the CSK folks cheered for CSK. We then go on the exhibit floor and we take pictures of the committee with the publishers and the book and the stickers and all of that. So someone came up to, and we wore our headbands, and someone came up to one of us. It was not to me. I was told this by the person that it happened to. You have ruined my whole conference. How can you wear that at a time like this? It just, it makes me feel, but what if a Palestinian saw it? And her response back was, well, how do you think I would feel if I saw somebody in a Palestinian armband? And there's two things that I would say to that. One is separate your issues around Israel from anti-Semitism. We didn't wear anything that was Israeli. We wore a symbol of Judaism because these are awards from the Association of Jewish Libraries. You don't get to tell me, what's anti-Semitic.
Yeah, and I definitely
I mean,
feel,
it's pretty shocking.
yeah, I definitely feel that, again, this is ALA. Sometimes in council, this is one of the reasons why I said to myself when I decided not to run for council again, I said I would have to be on the executive board or president of ALA. Because this idea of trying to be neutral, and when things happen, we don't address it, allow these types of things to continue, right? When the Black Lives Matter movement happened, of course, as African Americans, right? We're wearing paraphernalia that says Black Lives Matter. And we had pushback from communities saying, hey, that is anti-police, or that is this, or that is that. So I say to this, we cannot as an organization have AJL and say that, or ideally or theoretically say it in theory, that AJL will be the standard in terms of helping guide or inform our knowledge about Jewish communities as it relates to librarianship. And then an important document goes out to the public and it's not given to AJL for comment or feedback on it before it goes out. I feel like, right, if we're putting out anything that's representative of the LGBTQIA plus community, we have to put it out as a community, not just what's representative in council and not just what's representative of a few librarians. This is about all librarians. And then this is my issue, and this is why I criticized ALA. I said, you're asking, how do we recruit more librarians from diverse backgrounds? You got to pay attention to them. You got to give voice to communities that are marginalized. ALA has not done a good job of that. In 1939, when they passed the Library Bill of Rights, the Library Bill of Rights are suggestions or guidelines, which is why I'm pushing for pro-library legislation. People can opt to do them or not do them. The American Library Association was silent on a lot of issues that were taking place in society, even though various civil rights leaders were calling the American Library Association out. It took the American Library Association from 1896 until 1939 to speak, to make a statement about libraries being a space for all people. We can no longer do that because right now communities are under attack. Do I have an approach that I feel everyone will agree with? Absolutely not, but I'm not afraid to have the conversation. I'm not afraid to say, oh no, we can't disseminate this resolution that represents this community. I tell that to my students. I say, if you are selecting books that are representative of the Native community, you need to go to Debbie Reese's website. And you need to make sure you're not selecting a book that has been criticized by people who are part of the community. I would take that same approach in leadership to say, whatever we disseminate to the mass public represents, the American Library Association is the oldest and largest organization. It represents everyone. And this idea of kicking these conversations down the road and accomplishing nothing, that's problematic to me as well. we kick things down the road when we don't have a resolution, and then we end up not doing something. And then when people look up, something has gone out without the majority of the librarians knowing about it. That is problematic as well. So.
Mindy, you got your hand up. Can you unmute her,
Yes.
Sean?
Oh.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
You're on.
This is wonderful. I am a sociologist. I love libraries. I'm not a trained librarian, but I'm a member of AJL. To talk about something that might not be as challenging a point of discussion, what I've noticed, I live in Washington, D.C., is libraries have evolved into community centers in a way. You can go there for book talks. You can go there for training in how to use a computer. You can go there for discussions of all sorts. How do you feel this has been something that actually official community development centers feel about? In DC, we have a community center, and the next block, there's a local library. Are there conversations between these different groups or different people who head them? Are there examples of good collaboration? You know, our resources are constrained. So it seems to me there's a lot of shared interest here. I'd like to hear some examples of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I definitely think that the American Library Association, we need more of it. Here's the problem with ALA being such a large organization. Public libraries in Chicago, they have a great partnership with community. They're calling it asset building now. That is the new term. They come up with all of these new terms, colloquialisms. And so in Chicago, there's a lot of great partnerships happening with local community assets. The problem is that it may not be happening across the country. And so because of that, there is this lack of opportunity for us to have that continuity of service. And just to give you an example of partnerships, Chicago Public Libraries partner with Chicago Public Schools. ICE has been coming into schools but they've been attempting to come into schools. We have a governor who is standing behind educators and saying, no, we know that they've struck down saying that schools are sanctuary spaces. And so the governor is saying, no, we're going to make sure that our schools are still protected and making it difficult for ICE to enter. And so there have been collaboration between the schools and the library and community assets to get information out to the communities to say, hey, here's some protocols. If you go to a library, it is not a sanctuary space, but here's some alternative spaces that you can go into, and here are some resources. And here's some suggestions. Here are some things that you do not have to say, or here are some things that you can do to exercise your right or to protect yourself. I would like to see more of that happen, but again, I don't think ALA, I have not seen it personally where ALA has broadcast or featured those types of collaborations on a mass scale so that we can benefit from it and sort of learn from these places that are partnering with these community resources.
Can I jump back?
Yes, yes.
I was also wondering, as I said, libraries and librarians are going into new areas, as I said, teaching computer skills, working with older people, having different interest groups. And that's great. And I'm wondering with those institutions that are called community centers, that have not really done that before or done that minimally. And again, different resources to different organizations. I just was wondering what kind of sharing on that level there is or could be.
What type of sharing? I definitely think that ALA, if we have an exemplar, if we have a community that is doing it, and if that community is doing an exemplary job of that, that those people can share the resources. And I hope I'm answering your
Yeah,
question
yeah,
correctly.
yeah. Mhm.
That they can share those resources. Like we have ALA Connect. And I know ALA Connect is primarily used as this platform to sort of communicate information, but I would like to see on ALA Connect a space where, you know, there's an archive of like webinars or seminars that you can visit, maybe showcasing or highlighting. That's this information sharing. And actually, Mindy, to your point, and this is it's a great question because, right, we're going to have to up our information sharing. We across the country, especially with regards to IFLA and our international library partners, as governmental decisions are saying, hey, U.S. is going to pull out of who? The U.S. is going to pull out of these spaces. Information sharing is going to become more and more important. So I think that ALA, we do need to develop those channels to make sure that we are gleaning from best practices across the country. And I don't think we have done that well. And one way that we can do that is by creating a space where we are sharing, maybe through seminars or webinars, where people can go on and see, this is what's happening at this library, and this is what's working, and this is what's not working, so that we can learn from these organizations. And in terms of partnerships, I think this is also going to speak to changing the narrative, which is what my campaign is on changing the narrative. Something else that is really big is this idea that not everyone see libraries as community spaces, right? How do we change that? Some of them see libraries, some people see libraries as, a space to kind of indoctrinate communities, right? And so how do we change that? We have to let people see us as leaders of technology, leaders of media literacy, information literacy. And so I think that we need to do, and one of the ideas that I had behind this was that there's so many communities across the country that have limited access to resources, limited access to information. We can partner with organizations like, right, the ADA, or organizations like the American Heart Association. There are these monthly campaigns that we can be more globally across the nation, sharing resources and building partnerships so that we can get more information to various patrons. And we need to do that like nationwide. So I definitely think this is something that, right, I would address if I were elected as president. How can we become better at information sharing?
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Andrea, you want to
Yeah.
put your email in the chat in case anybody wants to communicate? And then I see behind you your website. So if anybody is interested in digging deeper into Andrea's campaign, it's right there on AndreaJamison.com. I would like to thank Sean, our president, for hosting us, and Michelle for helping us host, and for David for getting this going, Paula for all of the publicity, and especially I'd like to thank Andrea for joining us. This was really fabulous. Thanks to everybody for
Thank you
coming.
so much. Thank you, David. And just know that if AJL were to support or endorse me as candidate, I would not have any committee without inviting AJL members from various roundtables, key leadership to those conversations, so that to inform the decisions that are made and the conversations that are had within council.
I don't think we endorse. I don't think
Okay.
that's something that we can do.
Okay.
But this was fabulous, really fabulous. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for attending.
Okay. Thank you.